You're listening to CherryPickin Entertainment.
Throw me the ball and watch what I do with it.
You are now tuned into the CherryPickin podcast with your host, Andre Cherry.
Hey, what's up, everybody? How are you doing? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the CherryPickin podcast. And if you can hear it in my voice, I'm slowly getting over being sick and having COVID a couple weeks ago. So I'm slowly getting back to my old self, and I appreciate you downloading this episode. I want to talk a little bit college football with you, week 4 action. We had a whole slate of games this past weekend. I'll talk about a few of those games that really had my interest, and then I'll also give you my top 5 locks for this weekend. So we'll just go ahead and kick this off. We'll dive right in. Colorado versus Oregon. This was a big time matchup. This was a big game being propped up by ESPN, by Fox. Everybody had their eyes glued to this game. I think folks were maybe a little skeptical if Colorado could come on the road to Oregon and get an upset, or even to make it close for that matter. And they did not make it close at all. They barely showed up. But I had a lot of hope coming into this game that Colorado would make it close, because we've seen them battle for the first 3 weeks of the season, these close games that they've won in the end. And I thought maybe there'd be a little bit of magic left for Colorado. They've got a lot of talent on that roster. We know Deion Sanders overhauled the roster when he came into town, but it just wasn't meant to be. Now, while I thought Colorado would lose this game, I thought they would at least make it interesting against Oregon. I figured Deion has done a lot to bring his athletes into the Colorado program, so it should be a close game, but man, was I wrong about that. 42-6 was the score of the game in favor of the Oregon Ducks. And this game was over at halftime, as Oregon was up 35-0 against Colorado. So we've seen Colorado with such a high-powered offense. We've seen quarterback Shedeur Sanders ball out. We've seen him be a Heisman frontrunner or Heisman favorite coming into the first 3 weeks of the season. And that just all went away with one half against Oregon. And they blanked Colorado 35-0 at halftime. I didn't see that coming, if I'm being honest. I thought it'd be a lot closer, but you got to give a shout out to the Oregon defense. They did a great job defending against Shedeur Sanders. Coming into this game, Sanders was being considered, like I said, a Heisman candidate, but his chances got dashed after Saturday. He went 23 for 33 for 159 yards and only 1 touchdown. If we look at his stats coming into this game, Shedeur Sanders averaged 417 yards passing per game, with 10 touchdowns against only 1 interception. What Oregon did against Shedeur Sanders cannot be understated. They really did a great job controlling, limiting the effect that Shedeur Sanders has on the game. That is a tremendous feat, because Shedeur Sanders has been marvelous through 3 weeks of college football. If we also take a look at the defense, the Ducks sacked Sanders 7 times, which is wild. The Ducks also limited Colorado's rushing attack to only 40 yards. So the defense really got after it like gangbusters. The Buffaloes also committed 12 penalties for over 106 yards in this game. So it just wasn't a good day at all for Colorado against the Oregon Ducks. They were outgained in yardage by Oregon, 522 yards to only 199 yards. So it just was not working for Colorado at all. I think a lot of folks were waiting for this moment to see Colorado lose and for them to struggle, and boy, did they struggle mightily against Oregon. If you followed the coverage at all during the pregame, the coach for the Oregon Ducks, Dan Lanning, he gave a fiery speech to his team, and I quote, "The Cinderella story's over, men. They're fighting for clicks, we're fighting for wins. There's a difference," end quote. And Lanning gave this fiery speech in front of the ESPN cameras, and there was a lot of people present for it. Deion Sanders, he took the high road. I mean, he got humbled, certainly, getting spanked like that, the way that they did against Oregon. But after the game, Deion Sanders had a quote, and I quote, "I don't say stuff just to say it for clicks. contrary to what somebody says. Yeah, I keep receipts, but I'm serious. I analyze and I understand what we're up against and what we have and what we need, Sanders said. One thing I can say honestly and candidly, you better get me right now. This is the worst we're going to be. End quote. This is something that he says. This is going to be the worst that we're going to be. You're not going to catch us like this again. And I have some serious doubts and reservations about that as they face USC this weekend at home. I think it could get uglier than what we saw against Oregon, if I'm being honest. But he has to inspire confidence, and that's all that Deion has done since he's been in college football, is inspired people and inspired his team. So this was a great quote from Deion Sanders to inspire himself and inspire that fan base, inspire his team to, take your lick, but we're going to keep working, and next week we'll get USC, and let's ball out and see what we can do, see where the chips may fall. But that was a rough loss. I was disappointed because it has been fun following Colorado, all the hype, all the hysteria around what they've been doing up there in Boulder, and it's just been a lot of fun to watch. I don't think one loss diminishes that in any way, but I think if they lose against USC, which they are expected to lose to USC, I believe the Trojans are favored by like 22 points or something like that. I think all of the magic kind of goes away. It fades away. And that doesn't mean that Colorado can't still have a great run compared to how they finished last season. They only won one game. They lost 11 games last season. They're on their way to hopefully going to a bowl game. I mean, that's a big achievement for a team that went 1-11 last season. I mean, you gotta be proud of that. I think they had their sights set higher than that, which is fair. Everybody wants to win. Everybody wants to go to the Pac-12 championship game. Everybody wants to be in the playoffs. Everybody wants to win a national championship. But if we're being real, it doesn't look like that will be in the cards for Colorado this season. Certainly when Travis Hunter went out a couple weeks ago, that's a huge, huge loss on offense and defense. But I'm still looking forward to seeing what Colorado can do this season. I don't think a loss last weekend or even a loss this weekend against USC, if it happens, takes away that hope that we all have, because they are an underdog story. It just takes away some of the magic, some of the luster away from what Colorado's doing. It's been awesome to watch these past 3 weeks. Last week stunk a little bit, but Colorado still has a lot to play for this season. The season is not done. But what I will say is there were a lot of people on social media, if you follow college football, if you follow folks in the media, that were just waiting for this moment for Colorado to lose. And they just are so hype about that. Danny Cannell is one of the people that I'm thinking of most notably. You can find his tweets. I mean, he just goes in against Colorado. I don't know if he's got a personal grudge against Deion or that team, but it's really embarrassing to watch this kind of play out in real time on social media. It's just, I don't understand why people feel the need to go so far against Colorado. We've seen people go so far the other way, like they really go all in for Colorado, and let them have their fun. I mean, this is a program that has been irrelevant for close to a decade, I would say. I mean, I can't tell you the last time I thought about Colorado football. I think it's good for the game, what he's doing. It's exciting. But to have folks kind of go hard the other way, it's just like, what's wrong with you? Like, grow up. But that's my opinion, one guy's opinion. But again, Colorado versus Oregon was a big-time matchup. I thought Colorado would make it a little bit closer, but it wasn't meant to be. They got a big game against USC this weekend, so good luck to the Buffaloes. Then we had Notre Dame versus Ohio State. This was a big-time matchup Saturday night. This one was a very close game. Ohio State pulled it out 17-14 on the road up in South Bend. I thought Notre Dame would have too much offense for Jim Knowles and his Ohio State defense to try and contain, if I'm being honest, because they are so potent through the air and on the ground rushing. But you got to give a shout out to the Buckeyes for holding the line when it mattered. Ohio State delivered on the biggest stage possible, and they limited Notre Dame to a season-low 14 points, which is no easy feat. The Buckeyes defense had 2 critical 4th down stops inside Ohio State territory, and Ohio State's offense seals the victory by scoring a touchdown with 1 second left in the game. So huge effort from Ohio State to pull this off. A very close matchup. Ohio State, they get a bye week this week before playing against Maryland on the 7th, which is no gimme win in my opinion. Maryland is undefeated right now. They're 4-0. They've got a chance to go 5-0 this weekend after playing Indiana at home. So it's not going to be a gimme win for Ohio State in a couple weeks, but they do benefit from having a bye so they can rest, recharge, refocus, and get ready for the rest of the season. So that's a huge victory for Ohio State. Tough loss for Notre Dame. They dropped 2 spots in this week's AP poll to number 11, which is not terrible. It really isn't terrible because there are some teams above them that will fall out just due to the scheduling, the teams that they play in their conference. There will be some shuffling, and Notre Dame is still technically alive in the college football playoff discussion. Dropping only 2 spots in the AP poll is pretty good, with all things considered. The Irish can still play itself back into the playoff conversation, but they will have to get through number 17 Duke this weekend if they want to have a chance at that. I believe College Game Day will be at that game this weekend at Duke. So, and I can't really tell you the last time if they've ever been to Duke for a College Game Day. I would assume no, but if you know, let me know. Tweet at me. Notre Dame, that's a tough loss. It would have helped if they had won, certainly, but they are not out of the conversation at all. Ohio State's certainly still in the conversation for the playoffs. So all things considered, I think it was what you would hope for if you're either of these teams. If Ohio State had lost, you would hope that they wouldn't fall that much, that they wouldn't fall that far. And so I think there's still a lot to be said here for where they're sitting in the AP poll, the games that they have remaining on their schedule. Notre Dame doesn't play a difficult schedule the rest of the way. They do have Duke. Duke is an undefeated team. They beat Clemson a few weeks ago. We all know that story. And then they also have to face USC down the road here. But all things considered, it's a manageable schedule. And I would, if I'm a betting person, I would say Notre Dame has a good shot of playing themselves into position for a spot in the playoffs this year. So it'll be interesting to watch how it shakes out for both of these teams. But it was an exciting weekend of college football in week 4. There were a lot of exciting games, a lot of interesting matchups in this early of the season, which is outstanding. At the other side of this break, I want to get into some of the games for week 5 that have my attention. I'll give you my locks. We'll talk about some of the other matchups that don't make my top 5 locks, but there's still a lot to enjoy for week 5. I can't wait to preview that with you all. On the other side of this break, I'll be right back. The Cherry Pickin' Podcast is coming back. Don't go anywhere.
Want to know what life is really like after the game is all over? Real athletes are here to share their true stories of adversity and triumph every week on After Orange Slices. Even if you don't like sports, pro athletes, former college stars, celebrities, coaches, public speakers, doctors, and all kinds of experts join the show, and there's a little bit of something for everybody. Join me, Bridget, for a slice of inspiration, plus your everyday sports news sprinkled in. New episodes every Friday at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, available anywhere you get your podcasts.
Basketball is back. And with that comes joy, tension, heartbreak, buzzer beaters, and elation. It's time to be courtside for every one of those moments, no matter where your team is playing. Short Court specializes in making replica and custom basketball courts for your home, office, sports cave to decorate your walls with all those memories. If you have a picture, we can recreate it. Featured in the 2021 UniWatch Holiday Gift Guide, short courts are made using real wood. We frame and give them an epoxy finish to protect the new centerpiece of your memorabilia collection. With previous customers including Northern Kentucky University, Southern Utah University, 199 Apparel, The Perimeter Podcast with Adam Morrison, and many more celebrating the careers and retirements of their coaches, it's time you visit shortcourts.com for more info and a gallery of our work, or you can send us an email, info@shortcourts.com. Be sure to find us on social media, just search for Short Courts. It's time to bring the home court home.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. On this side of the break, I will give you my top 5 locks for Week 5 action within the Power 5 conferences. We'll start in the ACC. I'm taking NC State over Louisville. This is a big-time game in the ACC as both of these teams remain unbeaten in the conference. Louisville is tied with FSU atop the conference with 2 wins, while NC State has 1 win over Virginia from this past weekend. NC State's defense is going to have to step up if they expect to beat an offense as loaded as Louisville's. The Cardinals quarterback Jake Plummer leads the ACC with 11.5 passing yards per attempt, and their running back Jahar Jordan leads the ACC with rushing yards per attempt at 9.6 and yards overall at 478. This team is going to be a threat in the air and on the ground, and NC State really is going to need to step up to have any short of a shot at victory. The Wolfpack won a game that I thought that they really should have dominated against Virginia, but I chalk up the fact that it was close due to the fact that former quarterback Brennan Armstrong came home. He was a former quarterback for UVA for many years, so I figured him coming home maybe had the emotions high for himself and the UVA squad, and they made that game very close because emotions were running high. I'm ready to see Armstrong have a performance that makes me feel confident that the Wolfpack will be headed in the right direction this season. I need him to be more of a reason that NC State wins games. In the game against UVA, Brennan went 15 for 30 for 180 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. So not great stats, but he was effective. They still were able to win the game. Moving forward, I need Armstrong to be a reason why the Wolfpack win games and a reason why they win close games. I'm hoping that the home crowd at Carter Finley Stadium turns up and turns out for the Wolfpack this weekend. So with all that said, I'm taking NC State over Louisville in a very close matchup. I think it will be very close, but I'm taking the Wolfpack over the Cardinals. In the Big Ten, I'm taking Maryland over Indiana. It feels like things are finally starting to take shape for head coach Mike Locksley and his Maryland Terps. Maryland has a shot to start 5-0 for the first time in school history since 2001. That they will be 5-0, hopefully after their matchup against Indiana this weekend. The offense looks like it's really clicking. I think they say weather will be a factor for this weekend for this matchup, but I still think the Terps win big over the Hoosiers this weekend at home. So in the Big Ten, I'm taking Maryland over Indiana. In the Big 12, I'm taking Oklahoma over Iowa State. I was surprised that Iowa State got the victory over OK State last weekend, considering how its season started and the state of things, and the head coach, Matt Campbell, not looking really his best through these first few weeks of the season. I think it was a great moral victory for everybody associated with the Cyclones program to get that victory over OK State. However, I think this weekend Oklahoma makes slight work over the Cyclones. Oklahoma has beaten Iowa State 23 out of the last 25 meetings against ISU, so I taking the Sooners this weekend. Oklahoma over Iowa State. In the Pac-12, I'm taking Utah over Oregon State. It's been really impressive to see the Utes rolling this season en route to a 4-0 record at this point in the season. Tough victories over Florida, Baylor, and most recently UCLA. This team fights. This team is resilient. And they are doing this all without their superstar quarterback Cameron Rising, who is still sidelined due to injury from last season. I think Utah continues to roll this weekend. Major props to the Utah defense as it's been playing at a very high level this season. They've limited opponents to only 9.5 points per game, which is 6th best in the entire FBS. Then in the SEC, I'm taking Florida over Kentucky. I think the pieces come together for the Gators this weekend in its matchup against the Kentucky Wildcats. If we take a look at the history between these two schools, the Gators had won 16 straight games on the road against Kentucky until that streak snapped in 2021. In fact, Kentucky has beaten the Gators 2 out of the last 3 times, so things have certainly changed dramatically, which is great for college football. However, this weekend, I think the Gators get a convincing victory over Kentucky to keep hope alive within the conference. I know former NC State transfer quarterback Devin Leary is at Kentucky, but I'm most excited to see how these teams' running backs fare this weekend. For the Gators, Trevor Etienne and former Temple transfer Ray Davis, who's at Kentucky, are both in the top 5 for rushers in the SEC. So we've got 2 top 5 rushers within the conference this weekend facing off. Ray Davis, again, who's a former Temple transfer, has the most touchdowns in the SEC currently at 7. So I'm taking the Gators over the Wildcats. So let me run those top 5 locks for you one more time. In the ACC, I'm taking the Wolfpack over Louisville. In the Big Ten, I'm taking Maryland over Indiana. In the Big 12, I'm taking Oklahoma over Iowa State. In the Pac-12, I'm taking Utah over Oregon. And in the SEC, I'm taking Florida over Kentucky. We got a couple other big games this weekend. We've got number 3 Texas versus number 24 Kansas. Who would have thought that I'd be talking about a big-time matchup in the Big 12 against Texas and Kansas? You probably wouldn't imagine that just a few seasons ago, but times are certainly different. Texas is back, and Kansas is ballin'. Both of these teams are undefeated, and both are ranked coming into this matchup this weekend. Texas has won 17 of the last 19 meetings with Kansas, but if we look at the last 3 games, these meetings have been extremely close, within a touchdown. With the exception to last season, though, when Texas beat up on Kansas by a score of 55-14. Beyond that, aside from that, the last 2 matchups between these 2 teams, if we're not looking at last season, have been extremely close. And Kansas is a much different team. They've got the offense, they've got the defense. They look like a more complete team out of the Big 12 this season. So I'm not saying that it'll be a rout for Texas. I'm not even saying that they'll win. I'm just saying it's going to be a close matchup is what I expect. And we're very familiar with the stars on Texas this season, but I'm more intrigued to see what Kansas's running back Devin Neal is able to do against the Longhorns defense this weekend. He currently has the 4th most rushing yards in the Big 12 and is tied for first in the conference with 6 total touchdowns. Neal is a dual threat rushing and receiving attack, and I believe he could be a playmaker to watch out for this weekend against the Longhorns, so that's something to look out for. But I'm excited for that game, and I can't tell you that I would have been, if this was a couple years ago, say that I'm excited for a top game in the country, Texas versus Kansas. There's some Big 12 implications on the line here, so it's a big-time game for both of these teams, so it should be exciting to watch. Then out of the SEC, we've got number 13 LSU versus number 20 Ole Miss. Big-time matchup this weekend. LSU is atop the SEC West standings at 2-0, while Ole Miss is reeling from its 24-10 loss against Alabama last weekend. From an offensive perspective, I really thought Ole Miss would bring it against Bama last weekend, but boy was I wrong. Ole Miss was only able to score 1 touchdown the entire game, and that came in the first quarter. And the Crimson Tide limited the Ole Miss rushing attack to only 56 yards on 29 carries. The loss against Bama was disappointing for sure, but if Ole Miss loses this weekend against LSU, that'll be deflating, and I don't see a path forward where Ole Miss can win the division with 2 losses, especially considering this team travels to Auburn in a couple weeks and also faces Georgia later on this season. So it's very crucial that both of these teams win this weekend, but it's really imperative that Ole Miss wins this weekend after a surprising loss, which I don't know many folks thought Ole Miss would lose against Bama, if we're being real, because Bama hasn't looked that good, but Bama turned it on against Ole Miss, got a very solid victory against the Rebels, who I think are a team trending up. Even though they lost to Bama this past weekend, I think their stock was high, and it's disappointing that they lost against Alabama this past weekend, but they've really got to rebound quickly against an LSU team that is not going to give up. LSU is not going to be some pushover team. So they really need to get a really important victory this weekend if they have any shot of staying alive within that division out of the SEC. Well, there we have it, folks. There we have it, my friends. Thank you for listening to another episode of the CherryPickin Podcast. This is my Week 5 preview. I hope it gets you ready for the action this weekend. Last weekend was phenomenal. We had a bunch of great games. This weekend is lining up to be just as special. Thank you for listening to this preview. I cannot wait to talk to you soon, and I hope you enjoy watching college football this weekend. Take care, everybody. Have a good week. Peace. So the defense really got after it like gangbusters. Thank you again for tuning into my CherryPickin Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to subscribe to my show and drop me a rating on Apple Podcasts. All of my digital content can be found at the website CherryPickinSports.com. And if you are looking to interact with me via social media, my Twitter handle is @Cherry_Pickin. That's PICKIN. On my Twitter, you'll also find a link to my blog where I post my weekly college football predictions and analysis. I can also be reached via email at cherrypickinsports@gmail.com. Please feel free to reach out to me regarding what you like about this podcast or about what content you'd like to hear more of on future episodes. I sincerely thank you for your support, and I can't wait to talk to you again soon. Take care.